Hello everyone. Welcome to WayWORD Book Festival and welcome virtually to sunny Aberdeen, although I am actually abroad and I am coming to you from slightly less than sunny today, Edinburgh. But nonetheless, the festival's home is in Aberdeen, and so for all intents and purposes, we're in Aberdeen right now. This festival is brought to you by the Word Centre for Creative Writing with the generous support of Creative Scotland and the University of Aberdeen. We are absolutely delighted to have, in fact honoured to have Alex Wheatle with us today. My name is Sarah Barnard. I will be chairing today's event. I am a general book person. I used to work in libraries, publishing and bookselling, and now work in none of those, but I'm also a recent graduate of Creative Scotland's training programme for literary chairs, so I have some accreditation to be here with you today. We're also delighted to have Leslie providing BSO interpretation for us, and she should be visible throughout the event for any of you who need her services. Yeah, and that is all pretty exciting. I'm very excited that we're going to be talking about Kane Warriors today with Alex, as well as touching on other aspects of his impressive career. There will be time for audience Q&A towards the end, so if you have anything you'd like to ask, please do pop it in the Q&A box. I'll give you a little bit of a heads up as we're kind of winding up towards the end of our conversation, and I will be taking your questions, putting them to Alex at that point. So please start getting your thinking caps on, and I'm sure you're going to have something fantastic to put to us both. Really looking forward to your participation in the event. And so that's about it from me. And I'm going to try not to talk too much because my computer is making noises like it might sort of like disappear into the air, much like the pterodactyl on the poster which we were talking about. So let me go ahead and introduce Alex. Alex Wheatle is the acclaimed author of more than a dozen books for adults and young people. He was born in Brixton to Jamaican parents and spent most of his childhood in a Surrey children's home. Following a stint in prison after the Brixton Uprising in 1981, he started writing poems and lyrics, becoming known as the Brixton Bard, and in fact that is still where you can find him on Twitter. So at Brixton Bard, follow him, he's got good things to say. His remarkable life story has recently been dramatised as part of Steve McQueen's Small Axe series, which brought his kind of life story to a bit more attention. He has won the Guardian Children's Fiction Prize. He's a Carnegie Medal longlistee, and in 2008 he was awarded an MBE for his services to literature, maybe an MBA too, I don't know. And today we'll be talking about, I think technically not quite his newest novel, but new in paperback, Kane Warriors, which tells the true-to-life story of Tacky's War, which was a slave uprising against British slavers in 18th century Jamaica. So before we get into the chat, Alex, I'm going to do a little virtual round of applause for you, and I'm going to feel it from the audience at home.
Right, well, I've never had that before, so that's quite lovely. So thank you for that introduction. Wow, I think I hope I can live up to that fantastic introduction.
Well, more than will, I'm positive about it. Shall we begin with, could you please tell us a little bit about Kane Warriors? Because I've given them kind of like one line.
Yeah, you have.
Summary there.
Well, I feel, Sarah, that I've come full circle because, as you mentioned, I spent a short time in prison after the Brixton Uprising in 1981. And whilst I was there, I was given a copy of The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. Now, The Black Jacobins is a non-fiction account of the revolution in Haiti, the slave revolution that occurred in 1791, if my history is correct. And that centers around Toussaint Louverture, who basically led the slaves to freedom. And so that narrative stayed with me for many, many years, and his history has always been one of my favorite subjects. And so right about 3-4 years ago, I was visiting my mother in Washington, D.C., And when I see her, because I didn't grow up with her, I love to hear tales about, when she was growing up in Jamaica. And she grew up in a place called Richmond, which is near the north coast of Jamaica. Now, if any of you are familiar with the James Bond books or Ian Fleming, my mother lived very close to James Bond Beach, not too far away. And Ian Fleming had a house there called GoldenEye and so on. I think they shot the scene where Ursula Andress emerges from that incredible blue sea. And so often when my mum was quite young, she would walk past GoldenEye and she dreamed of maybe being a journalist one day, or even better, a novelist. And that dream didn't quite happen for her, but it kind of happened with me. So when we were sitting 3-4 years ago, she mentioned the fact that when she was a very young girl, around about 6 or 7 years old, and this is in the late 1930s, early 1940s, she mentioned that many of the elders would sometimes gather at night, especially harvest time, and the name of Chief Tacky would come out in hushed terms, whispers, and and the legend would be told of Chief Tacky's Kane Warriors still trotting the land, and they were bigger than big characters, and for the imaginations of any child. And so I wanted to know who this Chief Tacky was. So I started to do my research, and I was in Jamaica, so I had a chance to do that, visit libraries and go to museums. And I discovered that Chief Tacky indeed led the slave revolt of 1760 in Jamaica, in the, very adjacent to the area where my mother grew up. And so I just felt compelled to write this story. It was fascinating. I couldn't confirm too much detail about Chief Tacky in Africa, in West Africa. He derived from Ghana before he came to the Caribbean. But the story structure was in place. The fact that he attacked Fort Haldane, that he managed to free the slaves from neighboring plantations, that's all confirmed fact. And so I had that to put my story on, hang my story on, if you like. But the further I went into my research, and I discovered that even young boys who were obliged to work in the cane fields, they were treated brutally. So I just felt it would be much more powerful if I relate this story from a young boy's perspective, a teenage boy. So that's how Moa Umbasa was born.
That's really interesting. And I was actually going to ask, I was wondering if you ever felt any temptation to write it from Tacky's point of view. And I wondered, because I wondered what the motivation was behind writing it from a teenage point of view, and whether that came from kind of writing young adult, or which direction that came from. So why Moa, and how did you create Moa?
It just kind of had a huge impact to me, the lives of these young children and teenagers on the plantation. And I'm thinking, when you think about great stories of history, the great wars and so on, they're always told from an adult perspective, aren't they? But very rarely you get shown the perspective of a young person, what experiences are like for them as they go through this traumatic time. And so I really wanted to try and capture that if I could, because sometimes in war zones and all the traumatic experiences of young people that the world goes through, not just young people, we very rarely hear. I mean, Anne Frank did it so well, but it's a rare piece, isn't it, when you could really delve into the mind of a young person going through such traumatic times.
It is, and I think you create that world so well. It's really affecting, and I think it's kind of one of the things about young adult, because of course I read it as an adult, and you're writing it as an adult, and I think as an adult it is really kind of horrifying in a way that I think a teenager reading it's really like a story of heroism, and it is a story of Black heroism. And I've been reading a few of your interviews you've done about the book, and I gather it's really important to you to kind of represent that narrative about history that you just weren't able to encounter when you were a young person growing up. Could you tell me a bit more about that, and like what you think, what you hope the kind of impact of Kane Warriors will be?
Wherever you go in the world, whether it's Scotland, obviously I know about William Wallace and what he means to Scots, and how proud that makes Scottish people feel. And you can go to anywhere in the world with that same kind of emotion, that same kind of, oh, we have our heroes too. And so, and Jamaica does, the Caribbean does, Africa does, Asia does. Everyone has their own heroes, and they should be celebrated equally. I mean, you could go back to Achilles and Hector of Greece mythology and so on, Greek mythology. And they're still celebrated as heroes today, aren't they? And stories are told about them, films are made about them, and they're celebrated because I think as human beings, we need someone to look up to, someone to be inspired by. And Jamaicans and Africans, we're no different. We need those heroes too. And this is one of the main motivations why I wanted to celebrate that time and celebrate what these people did, you know, in terms of trying to defeat slavery and trying to, trying to fight against that. And they deserve to be remembered. And so that was a chief motivation for me in writing a book, because everyone has their heroes, and they should be there in the canon. It should not just be a selected kind of Eurocentric view of who heroes can be. It should be a world-eye view of what heroes should be. So I'm just adding to that.
Definitely, and I think it's really important that that we have voices like yours. And I think also it's really important to present these stories through fiction rather than, well, not rather than, as well as kind of through history. Through kind of non-fiction text, because I think fiction, it's much easier to empathize with the character when you're like in their shoes. It feels like a really personal book for you, even though it is kind of, in terms of time and space, really far removed from any of our lives in some ways. So in some ways it feels like the book you were meant to write, and I wonder, could you talk a little bit about, like, you already have a little bit, but just the journey from like the very inkling of the idea to it being a published book in your hands? Like, what's the journey like?
Yes, Sarah, you hit the nail on the head. It does feel the book that I was meant to write, because I guess obviously my family, they have roots in St. Mary Parish, where the slave revolts took place, but also on my journey trying to identify myself as a son of West Indian immigrants who came and arrived in this country in the late 50s and early 1960s. And so really researching this book is really been a long journey for me, reconnecting with who I am, because as you mentioned, I spent a lot of my early years in a children's home from the age of 2.5 to the age of this pushing on 16. And when you're taken away from your own culture, your own people, and you're raised by somebody else, when you lose a bit of yourself, I entered Brixton not quite knowing who I was, and I struggled with my identity. And so serving time in prison and reading the Black Jacobins, that was the start of my journey of understanding who I was, where I came from. I mean, Marcus Garvey once said that you have to know your roots to know where you're going, to know who you are. And I believe in that kind of thing. And so Kane Warriors, as I mentioned earlier, is like me coming full circle. This is who I am. This is who I represent. I'm the child of these Kane Warriors, and their spirit lives on in me, so I need to represent that, and I need to feel proud about that. And so I'm rooted now, where once I was rootless. At least, I could say, okay, this might have happened to me, but these are my ancestors. These are the people who came before me. And I'm going to sing out their names and chant out their names and make them heroes. And I'll do all I can to represent them in the best way I can, because, these are Jamaicans. And that's where I come from. And yes, I'm born here. I'm British as much as anybody else, but this is my ancestry. And I think rightfully, I feel very proud about that. Just like any Scot, we feel very proud about their lineage and their history and their heroes.
That's really powerful. And I think the book is clearly kind of rooted in, it's dedicated to your mother, I believe. Yeah. It's really dedicated, really like rooted in that sense of ancestry and history. But I think like hopefully it will become part of kind of the canon, and like it will be the Black Jacobins for a young person today.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's exactly how I imagine it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a little bit about, because it is historical fiction and your previous YA novels have been kind of contemporary, and so how did that like affect your process, if it did at all, or were you just like, this is the same, like it's still just like plot, character? Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, Sarah, the main difference was that I had to do homework. So I spent, and not just about reading texts and going to museums and reading archives. A lot of that homework with Kane Warriors was just walking the lands that Tacky walked and going to the North Coast to where Fort Haldane was located. In fact, there's a good story here, because Noel Coward, he had an estate called the Firefly Estates, and that was right next door to where Fort Haldane was built back, about 400, 500 years ago. And so, in fact, just before that, Captain Morgan owned that property, him of rum fame, and he was once the governor of Jamaica. And he sacked Panama, I believe, but my next book will have him included in the narrative. You know, I can't leave Captain Morgan out. So that place in the North Coast has residence and history with it. So I feel that I was reconnecting with that part of Jamaican history. And I feel very privileged to be the one to tell this story, you know, and about these warriors. So it fills me with great pride.
That's great, and I think that does come through. But on the flip side, it's very kind of, it's a very good book. I recommend it to everyone listening, obviously. And I think what's great about it is it does deal with these kind of really important topics while being a really kind of plotty adventure story, and it's quite fast paced, and it's like incredibly readable and compelling. And I forgot my question because I'm just too excited about the book now.
Well, part of your question contained what is the main difference of writing something historical to from what I usually write is YA contemporary fiction. And I guess plot was the main thing, and I did mention homework, but I wanted to always push the plot along, and so for me, the ideal scenario would be for a young person to have nothing to do on a Saturday, pick up my book, and from say 10 o'clock in the morning and finish it 3 o'clock in the afternoon. For me, it's a big hit. You know, it's gonna have an impact, I feel, if you absorb the narrative in that way. And that's what it's intended for. And so that's why usually I'm writing 60, 70,000 word novels, but this one is, I think, just 38, maybe 40,000 words. But I just wanted to give a real big uppercut to the emotions for anyone who reads this. And you don't have to be 14, 15. You could be 85, 86 and still experience that same emotion, that same hard hit. That's what I wanted to give. And for me, it works like one of those hard-hitting films, like a Steve McQueen film, like 12 Years a Slave. I mean, when I saw that at the cinema, I could hardly walk out of my seat because I was impacted by the emotion of it all. And I guess I was searching for that same kind of reaction from any reader who might pick up Kane Warriors. I really wanted them to remember that narrative, to remember the word, the blood remembers, and remember especially what these people had to endure, what they had to experience. And so, you know, we're having these culture wars in the last few years or so. But the fact remains that Britain is responsible for a lot of cruelty, a lot of harrowing, the way, what they did impacted on brown and black people all over the globe. And they cannot disown that. They have to own that. I mean, when I go to Germany, when I visit schools there, I'm really encouraged when I see that everybody has to learn about the Holocaust. They visit the sites and so on. That's as part of their curriculum. But I feel that in the UK, we kind of shy away from that because there's somehow kind of, we're ashamed of it. But I think we still have to confront it, address it, talk about it, include it in a curriculum so young people know of what Britain did in the past. I think that's very important because they committed atrocities everywhere, you know, India, the Caribbean, Africa. And so we really have to face that on and deal with it and confront it.
Absolutely, and I think you're unequivocal about that, kind of both in the text of the story and in your, and I think it's an afterword. You do write about that, and I absolutely agree. Were you kind of consciously thinking about this book's like position potentially in the curriculum as you were writing it?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I was consciously kind of that was woven into the narrative, if you like. I mean, that was one of my main motivations, that hopefully it will be picked up, it will be studied, so people are aware of what happened in the Caribbean. And as you mentioned so eloquently before, that sometimes reading fiction, where you have rounded characters, you absorb the emotions of those characters and what they have to endure, is such an effective way of maybe creating some kind of empathy. Sometimes when you read cold non-fiction, it doesn't impact you the same way as a narrative fiction does. And so, I mean, I could well have spent 2 years writing one of these fic books, 800 pages of non-fiction, this happened, that happened. I've compiled with dates and so on, and people will read it and, oh, okay. And who would I impact if I did something like that? I think doing narrative fiction, where I can engage the reader with real characters, real emotions, I feel that I can impact them in a far greater way. And I think for me, that's the best way to teach history. If I can infuse anybody about any kind of aspect of history with what I've done with Kane Warriors, and they might look for other narratives out there that they haven't come across quite yet, then for me, I've succeeded, because there's a lot of history out there that we're not taught. I mean, attending school in the UK, I wasn't taught many historical aspects about the Caribbean or Africa or other places. And so hopefully this might be a gateway, if you like, for young readers. Oh, Kane Warriors, this happened in Jamaica. I wonder what happened in Africa. I wonder what happened here. And as I say, there's narratives everywhere that we still have to be written.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I was going to ask, where would you point those readers? And do those books, I mean, I feel like some of those books do exist, but some of them haven't been written yet. Yeah. But are there any, like, in particular you would like say, oh, you love Kane Warriors, you'll love this?
Well, I did. I wrote a book called Island Songs that was published in 2005, and I touched on the migration of West Indian workers to Panama to help build the Panama Canal. And that was the biggest engineering feat of its day. And thousands upon thousands of West Indians went out there to help build it. And they were asked to drain swamps and so on. But, you know, sadly, so many thousands of them perished because of yellow fever and other diseases. And I feel that story hasn't been told yet of the great West Indian experience. And so maybe one day when I get maybe a couple of years off so I can research it properly, I might deliver that narrative. Who knows? But I ask anybody, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or what parentage you have. It's just to ask your parents, your grandparents about their lives. And usually that's a gateway into historical narratives, when you can sense an idea of people and their journey through many generations and so forth. So that's a starting point. You know, elders should be telling their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren about their lives, so they're informed about what they went through. And for me, that's fascinating. So if we can all do that, then we could get to share all these wonderful narratives that we haven't heard of.
Yeah, that's so important. And I'm glad you brought up Island Songs, because I was going to ask if you feel like there's some sort of like through line from, because that was, did you say 2005? And now
yes, it was, yeah.
Yeah, now we're in 2021. Were you like consciously drawing on any of it as you wrote Kane Morris?
Yes, I was, because I think like anybody who watched it, Roots had an incredible impact on anybody who experienced that broadcast. I remember, well, it must have been about 76, 77 when that was first broadcast on British television. And so that story kind of lodged in the back of my head. I've always wanted to do something similar. So Island Songs was an attempt to at least begin that narrative, that West Indian narrative. And I like to carry that on given time. But, these kind of generational stories, they appeal to me. And I wanted to break out from just being the black guy who writes urban narrative. What's it like out on the streets and that kind of stuff. For me, I can expand on that. I'm much more than that kind of writer that they tried to box me in. And I think Island Songs 2005, in fact, I've got some great news about that because just the other day, I learned it's going to be reissued. It's going to be an audio version as well with a brand new cover. So look out for that. I really think it's one of my best pieces of work. And it's something that I'm going to return to because I do love my history. And I think I found myself a comfortable space where I can develop my career from this point. And yes, I always address what's going on in contemporary fiction with novels like the Crongton series and so on. But history is what grabs me, and telling the story that have yet to be revealed that compels me. So I'll be studying history for quite a while.
That's very exciting to hear about Island Songs. That's great. It's great news. Do you feel how do you feel writing for like a younger audience, a young adult audience, is different from writing kind of adult books? And how do you feel like your reception has been different in those different kind of genres?
Yes, you're correct in saying that the reception I've received has been different. Maybe from the gatekeepers. I mean, when I first started in fiction way back in 1999, I found it hard to get invited to all the big festivals and gatherings of writers and so on. I mean, it was only until something like 2015, after 16 years plying my trade, that I actually got invited to one of the major festivals, even though my books have received incredible reviews. I mean, East of Acre Lane and so on, and Brixton Rock, they did very, very well, but still I found myself kind of not being invited to such events. But when I tried my hand at young adult fiction, I found a more friendly place and I was welcomed, very much so. I mean, all of a sudden I started to get reviewed across the board. All of a sudden the invites to major festivals started to appear on my doormat. And so I just feel that I'm in a good space right now where I'm accepted. I think it's much easier because the gatekeepers are aware that in our schools, whether it's in Edinburgh, in London, Cardiff, that there's a diverse population there, and they need something for those kids to relate to. If you're coming from Pakistan or the Caribbean or Africa, you can't just feed them with one kind of one type of narrative that suits only maybe a white middle class or whatever, how it used to be some years ago. So now you have to offer them something that might appeal to them, that they could engage with, where they could recognize themselves or recognize their own kind of history and so on. And so I'm in that space. I mean, Mallory Blackman blazed a lonely trail for so many years, but now you have so many others, fit in that space. And so I think young adult is probably the most progressive, I feel, of the genres that are out there today. And I'm proud to be included in that.
That's great to hear. And that's certainly kind of my experience of the young adult space as well. It's very kind of expansive because I guess young adult is, well, I'll ask you actually, do you think young adult is a genre or is it an age bracket?
It's a very good question, Sarah. It's a very good question because I see it as fantastic storytelling. I mean, I'm 58 and I can really enjoy a young adult fiction novel from many of the writers I just mentioned. I mean, people like Juno Dawson, Sarah Crossan. I love their work. Mallory as well. Absolutely love it. And for me, it's kind of spoiled me a bit because when I dip into literary fiction again, and I see a slow-moving plot, and I see writers trying to be clever instead of telling the story and so on, I'm kind of thinking, well, where's the suspense? Where's the tension? Where's the plot development? I'm kind of getting a bit frustrated. But when I go back to YA again, I'm very well satisfied because the plot keeps moving. There's lots of drama. It keeps the page turning. So I guess in a way I might be biased, but I would say we are the true storytellers in middle, in YA and children's fiction.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that one. And I think, well, actually, I'd like to talk about another one of your recent books on that sort of note, which is Humiliations of Weldon Blake. And I know I think it's your second book for Barrington Stoke.
That's right, yeah.
Who, if people don't know, is Edinburgh-based publisher who published books for reluctant readers and like dyslexic readers. And the focus is, I know there's like a special edit to make it kind of linguistically appealing and glossy. Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about the Humiliations of Weldon Blake?
Well, I just come off writing Kane Warriors, and as you know, that's it's quite traumatic at times. I mean, throughout the writing, there's many times where I just had to step away, and I was in tears. Of the scenes I had to write and so on. So Weldon Blake, I wanted to laugh again. I wanted to, have fun, and it's kind of like I'm going back to my childhood, if you like, where I used to laugh at comics like Whizzing Chips, the Beano and the Dandy and so on. I wanted to create that same kind of enthusiasm, that same kind of hearty laughter that you get from reading those short narratives. So I had that in mind when I sat down to write Weldon Blake. I thought, okay, if I'm 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or whatever, what would I laugh at now? What would I laugh at today? And so I tried to get back into that mindset with the intention of making that audience laugh and have fun while reading the narrative. Because there's so few books out there like that. A lot of middle grade can be quite tough as well, not just historical novels, but the themes that writers choose these days, it can be quite tough for children to go through, and I accept that. But also, we need some kind of light as well to make them laugh, to make them, look forward to reading the next page, rather than thinking, oh God, what's going to happen now, kind of thing. So hopefully I provided that with the Humiliations of Weldon Blake. I had a fun time creating that.
I think, that's really important. And I think as much as I quite like books where I'm like, oh no, what's going to happen next? In this world that we live in, you kind of want to turn the page and know that you're going to laugh out loud. And I think,
it's a nice feeling, isn't it?
It is. And I just saw as well that you're doing a quick reads.
Yes, I am.
Next year, I think.
Yes, that's coming out in April. The title is Witness. I've just completed that. And also next year, I've been quite a busy boy. I have my new historical fiction coming out called Kimosha of the Caribbean. And this time, the hero is a young girl who's 15 years of age, and she gets to sail the seas with Captain Morgan. Very, again, I'm going back to my childhood because I remember reading Huckleberry Finn. I remember reading... oh God, what's the other one? Tom Sawyer, and Treasure Island. Treasure Island. So again, with my excited 8, 9, 10-year-old kind of mind, that what I used to love reading, I'm trying to recreate that excitement and adventure in these historical novels.
So it's interesting that that you have Captain Morgan in that one, and you had Tacky in Kane Warriors.
Yeah.
I wonder, I don't know if you've made this connection, but how does it feel kind of fictionalizing real people's lives after your real life has also been fictionalized in small acts?
That's a good question, but Captain Morgan's been dead a little bit, so
he certainly has.
I think that he won't complain too much. And Sarah, I can't think of any kind of anybody who's tried to recreate or use his life. He led an amazing life, in a piece of fictional work. I haven't come across any narratives like that, so I thought, why not? Why not? He's a fantastic character. Let's use him. Just put him in there, So, and let's see what comes out of it. I mean,
I'm
I mean,
sure.
he's not the main protagonist. Kamosha is, but Kamosha sails on his ship, the Satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. What kind of research did you do into like the piratical life?
Oh, it's fascinating. It really is. I mean, I wasn't even aware that they were female pirates around back in
Mm.
Captain Morgan's days, and they sailed the seven seas and they kicked ass. They really did, and so that fascinated me.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamaica again is an important player because that was a main hub of pirates of the day, and
Mm-hmm.
they had a place called Port Royal, and it eventually got sunk by an earthquake, but at the time, it was probably the richest place on earth because this is where pirates used to hang out. That was the hub where they used to go off and sail and attack the Spanish ships that were filled with gold coming from the New America, Central America. And so
Mm-hmm.
they were attacked and plundered by these pirate ships, and sometimes the British would give them a license to do that. And so it's a fascinating part of our history. So I thought, I'm going to use that. Why not? Let's put it in a novel.
It sounds like you're having like a really fruitful time going through all this
Yeah.
history. Are you going to stick to writing historical for a little while?
Yeah, I think so. I'm enjoying it. So why not? You know, I'm really enjoying my writing now and I'm loving the research. I mean, now I could probably do a PhD on it. Who knows? Maybe if I can do it in novel form, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Maybe I could say to the examiner, can I just write a novel for my PhD? And if they say yes, then why not?
That probably, yeah, you don't want to go through all the rest of the kind of,
Yeah, all the agonies.
yeah, no, stay out of academia.
Mhm.
Am I allowed to say that at University of Aberdeen, Ben? I'm not sure.
I can't say that because I teach at Manchester Met.
Oh, wow. Well, I work for the University of Edinburgh, so we're all in trouble here.
Yeah, we are. You're recording that, aren't you? Oh God, I'm in trouble.
We're getting towards the sort of like Q&A time.
Yeah.
I wonder if you'd like to give us a little reading from Kane Warriors and
Yeah.
see what that inspires with the audience, and then we'll get back to your
Okay.
questions.
Yes, I'd love to give a reading. And this is the point where Moa and his best friend Keverton, Moa is 14, Keverton is 16, and they've been given a task. And that task is, after they finish work on a certain day, they have to drop their tools and prepare to kill the overseer. And so this is the piece. We dropped our bowls and mugs in a wooden box. Miss Gloria didn't meet our eyes. Fireflies hovered over her cooking pot. We collected our billhooks from the water tub. I sensed all eyes on me. I glanced up and down the dirt track. The western hills were now crowned with an amber glow. My heart pounded like old Mr. Cliff's hammer when he was fixing a large wheel. I shared a now I never looked with Keverton. He nodded. The small creatures in the field had already started their nighttime arguments. I gripped the handle of my knife so tight that redness appeared under my nails. Hormea had stopped putting her handcart on the way to the mud house and watched us. I felt her eyes burning into me. They would soon come for me, Moa. It might be tonight they would drag her out of her cabin. If she refused, they would take her anyway. I didn't want to fail her. My heart started to beat a warrior drum song. I prayed that the sky god, Naomi, would guide me. Pitney stopped playing. Say, I whispered to Keverton, say the door bolted. Bolted or not bolted, we have to kick it down. And then Keverton dashed towards Mr. Donaldson's hut. I soon caught up with him. If my heart could have run, it would have reached the cabin first. We both kicked the door down. Dust flew up in my eyes. I blinked furiously. Mr. Donaldson was taking his rest on his bed. He only wore his pants. His chest and feet were bare. His back ripper was on a table beside him, next to an open Bible and a wooden cup. He shot up quickly, not quite believing that he was being confronted by two field slaves armed with billhooks. He went for his back ripper. Keverton hesitated. His weapon trembled in his right hand. I didn't want to see Keverton whipped again. I didn't want Mr. Massa to force me to view his broken body. I couldn't bear it to dig Keraton's pit. I didn't want to see him dangling from a thick branch. Fear left me. Naomi was with me. I charged towards my tormentor. The whip crack was loud. He caught me on the neck, and the pain was deep and intense. It didn't stop me. Use both hands, Lewis had advised. Dig deep, twist. Make sure he don't breathe another dirty breath. My aim was true, just above his left nipple. My blade went in easier than I had imagined it. I turned the blade. He didn't scream. He just let out his final, long breath. It was quite something, watching the last moments of a dying man. He'd never enjoy a mug of rum again. No slave would ever feel the sting of his back ripper. He'd never molest another Homea again. He'd never marvel once more at the red sun dipping beyond the western hills. I pulled my weapon out. He fell to the floor, as did the Bible. As I stood still, not believing what I had just done, Keraton leaped on Mr. Donaldson and plunged his billhook into his back 5 times. The wooden floor turned red, staining the book. Some tiny ants scarpered. Some got drowned in the blood. My heart thumped my ribcage. Keraton and I shared a look. We heard screams from outside. I pulled back the white cloth from the window. People ran here and there. All was chaos.
Thank you so much. What a great note to end on. Chaos. If any of you haven't read Kane Warriors yet, that's a very good kind of wetting with a whistle. Sort of, it's I was going to say it's a thrill ride, which seems sort of not quite right, but it is very like propulsive and great. Well, we have a couple of questions from the audience, which I'm going to put to you, Alex. And let's see what they've got for us. I'll click on my little box. So a question from Elizabeth. She says, I found the inclusion of Akan religion in the novel very evocative and moving, and it gave the story an additional dimension. Can you tell us about your decision to include a spiritual element to the novel and how you researched this aspect of the story?
Yes, that was very important for me to do so and include that that belief system that they carried with them from Africa to the Caribbean. And I did my research basically from what I learned from Ghana and the gods that they used to pray to in Ghana, or still do in some ways. And I found out that it was very, very important for them that they tried to hold on to their belief system. And, you know, it wasn't just that they were transported from Africa and they had nothing to carry with them spiritually. So I just wanted to remind the reader that before, obviously, many of them were converted to Christianity, they indeed had their belief systems and they will call out gods. I mean, even my great-grandfather, he was buried in the same way as Akan buried their dead, the Akan Warriors buried their dead. That was kind of passed down through the generations, so they held on to it. And you know, we see in Haiti too, with the voodoo culture and so on, that derives from the Caribbean as well, and the drumming as well that we find in the early reggae bands of the late 1950s, or when I say reggae, before that was mento and ska and so on. So we could see the echoes of their belief systems in their culture. And so I really wanted to tap into that. It's very important that I did to represent them as they were.
Thanks. And I'm glad Elizabeth asked about that, because that was something in the back of my mind too, which I didn't quite get to. So thank you. Thank you both. Let's have a look. So there's a question about the history of slavery in Scotland from Nicola. England has a long way to go in acknowledging the full effects of chattel slavery and then and now, but Scotland is behind, although I know Aberdeen University has been doing work on this in recent years. Zakia Mackenzie did a talk this morning, and on another occasion I've heard her talking about the Scottish involvement in slavery in Jamaica, hence her surname. And I know you, Alex, this is this is me speaking, not Nicola, you are going to be doing a walking tour of Edinburgh quite soon.
Yes, I am, yeah.
On this sort of topic. So Nicola asks, would you be inspired to treat this creatively in fiction?
Yes, if a story leaped out of me and cried out or compelled me to write that narrative, absolutely. I think we have to, as I said before, we have to address this issue and try to address it without feeling awkward or feeling any shame. You know, so, and yes, indeed, Scotland, well, I wouldn't say Scotland, but people who were born in Scotland into probably aristocracy and so on, you know, those who live privileged lives, they did benefit from slavery, just like we did further down south in England and some parts of Wales. And so that should be acknowledged, you know, so, yeah, if I could find a narrative that really compels me, maybe I'll have to come up to Scotland, maybe research some archives in your universities, and there's something that leaps out at me and says, "Write me, write me, write me." Yes, definitely, I would write that narrative, but it have to be slightly different to Moa's situation or Kamosha's situation. It have to be a different kind of angle. You know, I don't want to keep retelling the same story so many times.
Are you hoping to get some inspiration maybe when you're doing your tours, when you're in Scotland, which is very exciting?
Yes, I am. I mean, I'm a history buff, so I'm always looking for opportunities that can inform me and teach me about the history. Because, you know, it's one of the saddest things that that I uncovered during my research is that in Manchester, where in the northwest of the country, in England, where the Industrial Revolution first took hold, those mill owners and so on, you know, they were the same kind of owners or masters as what owned the plantations in the Caribbean. So the white working class, in some aspects in the UK, we had the same masters telling us what to do and denying us of our rights. So we're intertwined, you know, we're more alike than we can ever imagine to be. So I think that truth needs to be told as well.
I absolutely agree. I recently read, what's it called? What Can White People Do Next? Or What Can White People Do Next by Emma Dabiri. And she's talking about the same thing and about how these categories of black and white were essentially created in, I guess, sort of like the same time as Kane Warriors is set. Do you think we need more awareness? Do you think more awareness of that part of our history will help?
Yeah, I think so. Forward? That would help. That would help. And this is the thing, because I know there's a guilt and there's a denial sometimes when we address this subject, but there's no need to be, because you know, the white working class did not benefit from the riches of slavery or the riches of what happened in India, where, you know, that country was plundered and looted for all its wealth. I mean, the East India Company were making as much domestic product as one of the top nations of its day. That's how much they exploited those lands. And you know, poor people didn't benefit from it. I mean, you know, we have to remember that the white working class lived in poverty for still do to some aspects, for centuries while all this wealth hoarding was going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, also stories that need to be told. Yeah, I agree. I've got another question. Actually, no, I have a question. We've been talking about how history inspires you, but you also talk a lot about music, and I wondered, like, in what ways does like your love of music inform your writing and inspire you?
This goes back to my youth. I can never write a piece of poetry or a song lyric without the boombox accompanying me. And usually on that boombox, it will be Burning Spear, it will be Dennis Brown, Bob Marley and the Wailers, Peter Tosh, you know, all these great reggae artists. And they inspired me lyrically. And really, that was my education. Because before I listened to reggae, I didn't know what was going on in South Africa. I didn't know what was going on in Angola or Mozambique, or all these places where Black people were fighting for freedom. And so once I heard lyrically about the struggle And then I went to the library to research it. So it was my first place of education, if you like, apart from reading the Black Jacobins. So for me, reggae music for me was my teacher. It kind of led me to where I am today, to just be more curious about the world, about how I managed to be here in this place, London, and my parents are Jamaican. How did that be, kind of thing? And so it kind of joined the dots for me, if you like. It helped me follow my kind of journey, if you like. And so even writing Kane Warriors, I put on my, I'm still very old fashioned. I have CDs. I don't use them as coasters like some people do. I still actually put it into a boombox and hear music from them. And so writing Kane Warriors, I listened to a lot of Bob Marley, especially the Exodus album. I listened to a lot of Burning Spear, a lot of anything referencing slavery, basically. I put that on. And music always kind of inspires me. Like sometimes when I'm writing YA fiction, contemporary YA fiction, I might put on a Sergio Leone piece, or soundtrack. So that, so I listen to it and close my eyes for 5 to 10 minutes, and then I find myself in the right mindset to create, because the landscape of his work, Sergio Leone, is so expansive, so expressive, so passionate. And so once I hear that, it makes me be a passionate kind of writer as well. Well, I hope to be anyway. So that's what music does to me. It fills me with a lot of passion, a lot of sometimes anger, a lot of love. So, we use music for that. Once, like when you get married, you never forget the song that you dance to, do you? Because it hits us, it impacts us emotionally. And so I try to use music in the same way with my writing career. I want it to hit me, kind of to have an impact on me, so I'm ready to create.
It's really nice to hear you talk about music as a sort of storytelling and as a sort of like connection to your history and culture in the same way as literature is, because I think they're often not really spoken, like they are often spoken about in the same sort of breath, but not so directly. And I think, you can't get much more concise a story than like a 4-minute pop song lyrics. So I think
for an example, before I wrote the scene that I just read out, I played Bob Marley's live version of The Heathen. And if you can find it on YouTube, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. It just puts you in that state of mind of, I just close my eyes and I can feel the tenseness of the characters. I feel the emotion of them. I feel their fear. I feel their dread. And when I hear Bob Marley's music, I'm sensing exactly those same things. And so it makes sense for me to play that. I know every writer is different. We all have different ways of preparation, and that's fine. And this works for me. It might not work for anybody else, but it does, it works for me. So I'm going to stick with it. It's served me quite well over the years.
Yeah, it'd be a shame to abandon it at this point. Although if you did, who knows what would come out.
Yes.
But I've got one last question from the audience, and then I think we might have to wrap up due to the cruel constraints of time, although I could keep talking for many more hours. Elizabeth asks, again, she says, thank you. She says, thank you so much for a fascinating conversation and your wonderful books. Any chance of a sequel to Kane Warriors? I would love to know more about what happens to Moa and Humea in the mountains. Does Moa ever see his mother and sister again?
Well, I can steer you towards Kenosha or the Caribbean, which is set in 1668. It's not quite a sequel, but it's got the same adventure. It's got the same kind of propelling narrative. So look out for that. That's being published in February next year. Yes, I'm going to think on that. At the moment, I'm writing another Crongton book. So when I finish that, I would definitely look at Moa again and Humea and see where I can take them on their next adventure.
That's very exciting, and I really liked that it did end on a hopeful note, which is an admirable thing in such a narrative. But I believe in Moa and Humea. I hope good things will happen to them. Well, thank you so much, Alex. It was such an enjoyable conversation and such a kind of rich, open discussion. And I really enjoyed reading Kane Warriors and rereading Kane Warriors, and I'm looking forward to another Crongton and looking forward to all the other, and Comosha. So much exciting stuff to come from you, which is
yes, there is. Yes, there is.
As well as like a rich back catalogue. So it's really all things to all people.
Yeah, it is. There's
Very
something there for everybody.
So thank you so much. Thank you to the festival, WayWORD Festival. Thank you to the audience for joining in and being here on this lovely, I'm looking out the window, it's not lovely, Saturday afternoon. Thanks to Media Services and to our student moderator for today. And thank you, of course, Leslie, for your excellent BSL interpretation. I forgot the word interpretation.
Yes, thank you, Leslie.
It's great to have you here. Please do go and buy all of Alex's books from, you can purchase them from the waywordfestival.com website. The books are sold via Blackwell's, and we love to support an indie bookshop, so very supportive of that too. Yeah, thanks very much for coming. I hope you will enjoy this conversation as much as I have. Please go to, there's a whole other day of WayWORD Book Festival, that's tomorrow, and there's many more events this evening as well. And you can follow the book festival on all social media using @WayWORD Aberdeen, that's WayWORD ABDN. So I hope I've thanked everyone I'm supposed to thank. And yeah, thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you for asking. We have to meet up, Sarah, one day.
In Scotland, when you're in Scotland.
Yeah, we do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Leslie.